Welcome to another lecture of cultural anthropology. In this lecture, we're going to continue talking about how language constructs reality, but now we're going to try to use this to understand other debates that are a little bit more current. So again, just keep in mind that the relationship between words and the objects or the things that they represent is not natural. It's something that is arbitrary. It's not inherent. It's historical. So remember, right, that language is not a transparent medium for the transmission of thought. Rather, language structures reality, right? And language is deeply connected to culture and to the way in which we see things. And again, thinking back to the first few lectures, right? Culture is not always something that's we're not always conscious about culture. Some of the ways in which language orders reality are not that easy to recognize or to reflect upon. Rather, they sort of escape that self-awareness because they are so ingrained in our day-to-day lives, right? That we don't really need to think a lot about the way in which we talk, right? This is something that we can do very quickly. We can talk, we can construct new phrases very quickly without necessarily having to think about what we're saying, right? And the way in which this works is because we're so used to talking and to using language. But that language is not something that is innocent or transparent or neutral. You might remember this image, right? And how we can describe this as empty barrels, but in reality they might be filled with gases that can be toxic or explosive. You might also remember this little graphic, right, with icon, index, and symbol. Both icons and index have some sort of direct or indirect relationship to the object, right? There's some sense in which they represent either literally or tacitly, implicitly the sign and the signified, right? But words are symbols, and symbols are based on convention and have an arbitrary relation to the signified. So, thinking about this article by Yarimar Bonilla and Jonathan Rosa, they're trying to think about this hashtag activism, right, that we see every day, and how social media, especially Twitter, becomes this sort of non-place, right, through which communities that are underrepresented in traditional media can sometimes challenge news and stereotypes about who they are, right? So this becomes a sort of public space, but not really, right? So Twitter is a non-space, and it's a problematic a problematic public space because it creates this illusion, right, of being somewhere. In this particular case, they are talking about Ferguson, and what happened in Ferguson, where an innocent black man was murdered by the police. So they want to sort of analyze this distinction between Ferguson, the place, the concrete geographical location, and hashtag Ferguson as a place that sort of exists in Twitter, right? So it's a hashtag that is making a reference to a specific location, not to a specific event, but to a specific location, but somehow it becomes associated with this event, and also it becomes in a way representative of the location, but it's not the location, right? They also want to analyze how Twitter is divided in these smaller communities where people are sharing content and tweeting stuff about things that that other people in their communities also support. So through these specific hashtags such as Ferguson, hands up, don't shoot, and if they gun me down, and no angel, right? They want to create. This is something that appeared alongside different photos, right? Hands up, don't shoot. That's people who were raising their hands, asking not to be shot just because of how they look or what they were wearing, right? If they gun me down, is this idea of how specific uh, pictures are selected when uh, innocent black people are shot, right? So what pictures does the media select? What pictures does the media select when somebody else gets shot, when a white person gets shot? What sort of pictures do they select, right? And this again, this is thinking about this idea of index icons and symbols, right? What does it mean when you're creating this relationship between an icon that's a picture that can represent something very specific and very clear, with a text that's a symbol or that's symbolic? What does it mean, right? And these hashtags that they're talking about, they are also indexical in the linguistic way because they imply an event. They don't talk about the event directly, but they imply the event that happened in a particular place. But at the same time, they're an index in this more traditional way because you can look it up. You can just search on Twitter hashtag Ferguson, and all of the things that say hashtag Ferguson will appear. So just think, if you're on Twitter, it's a tough place to be. But if you use Twitter, just think about these popular hashtags. What do they represent? How are they indexical to specific events, to specific people? And how are they connected to activism, right? And what does it mean to be a hashtag activist? How is this a real form of activism? Is it not a real form of activism? This is something that we need to sort of think about constantly, right? Especially when other ways of participating in social movements are not readily available. So much of this hashtag activism is concerned with breaking up these indexical and iconic signs and the way in which they are connected to symbolic narrations. For example, these pictures that appear with hand signs, like connecting specific people to street gangs, right? Hoodies and hijabs, right? Specific pieces of clothing that also become indexical of certain representations, certain stereotypes that are later used through Twitter and to social media and traditional media, right? So according to Bonilla and Rosa, hoodies are only a sign of criminal behavior, right, when they are contextualized in relation to particular racialized bodies. So hoodies in themselves become in a form of index only when they appear in relation to black bodies specifically. So here we can think about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and how it can be expanded, right? Because it also influences the way in which we use racialized language to describe, for example, rioting and looting versus celebrating, right? Something that's been discussed a lot and that is discussed constantly. This idea of threats, who is a threat, and victim blaming, the way in which newspapers, different news outlets talk about specific events, what's implied in the way in which they describe events, in which they describe people, and how in a way we don't really reflect on that because we just read it as being neutral language and we take it at face value. And also the use of labels, right, such as alt-right. What is that telling us? What is that not telling us? So when we think about these and these sort of different types of signs, icons, index and symbol, we can also think about memes, right? What is in a meme? What are memes funny? Memes are funny in a way because they also sort of connect specific icons that that become an index, right? So this image that you see right here, this is a particular index. You don't have to hear anything, right? And perhaps it's a little bit outdated, but perhaps a lot of you will recognize this picture as representing the most interesting man in the world, right? He builds castles in the desert. He makes Buddhist monks laugh. And when he's thirsty, he drinks Dos Equis, right? So he's the most interesting man in the world, right? And the idea here is that this is something that you already understand, that you already associate with something. And the way in which a lot of these memes work, right, is that they blur these distinctions between icons, indexes, and they play with the meaning of these symbols, right? So, for example, if you were to read this other meme that has text, that has some symbolic, some signs that are symbolic, not only iconic and indexical, but rather the use of language, right? This is meant to be funny because this has nothing to do with the actual image, but it's still using the same sort of format. And memes can be reproduced in this way, right? They have this same set of you can use this image and sort of reproduce some parts of the text but change key elements. And of course, if you have emailed me, you'll know that I'll answer your emails. This is just meant to be funny. Thank you.